Hello, it's Billy Colburn with the Courier-Record newspaper. This is interview number 4. Today we're with Mary Ellen Yeatts, candidate for Nottoway County School Board, District 2. This airtime is paid for by the candidate. There have been no agreements or discussion about topics or questions. And so, Mary Ellen Yeatts, we welcome you to the Courier-Record.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you. It's not like we haven't seen each
each
other
other
times before.
I love a small town.
I know, me too.
You are retired. You've been a career educator. Why, at this stage in your life, you decided to go for what's arguably one of the toughest jobs in local government, the school board?
Well, I think that the toughest job really is being on the front line, being a teacher, if you really had to know the truth.
Fair point.
I think that, honestly, the oversight is actually easier than what we do all of the time in the classroom. I think the biggest thing for me personally has been that I'm looking at a school board that could potentially be made up of no one that has any educational experience or background in the system. And I think being an insider to what really happens on a daily basis within a school division is more helpful than trying to flesh all of that together as an outsider quite often.
Okay.
I think that plays for you very well because I know my students. I know the struggles that the community faces, and I know how they trickle down to my students. Everything we've got going on in Nottoway, both Blackstone and Crew at the moment, is not good for kids. I was out riding around yesterday. It's after school, had some business in Crew. The amount of students that I see walking the streets in the afternoon, even at night. I went through McDonald's the other night. It was about 9 o'clock, I say. I was very concerned to see the amount of students and children that were walking around in the parking lot. And with everything that's gone on down there recently, it does give you a moment of pause when you're sitting there in a drive-through line. But our students just have a disadvantage, and not all, but many of our students have a disadvantage because of our poverty rates here.
Right.
Poverty is one of the things that we know affects students more than anything else. I have taught students that were homeless. I have taught students from divorce. I have taught students that come really from single parent families, students who live with a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, so there's not that firm family foundation all the time. Many foster kids, students who I'm sure were coming to us when Madeline's house was very involved in the community.
Right.
And of course, we're not privy to those things. We don't know.
Right.
But I know how that bleeds in. And so when we're looking at students per se, I think our perception is that we always look at the high academic students, the high achievers.
Right.
That's not who we teach.
Right.
We teach from here to here. And somewhere in the middle, we have to reach that. Right. Our students are struggling. I'm sure this will come up later probably in the interview with COVID loss. Right. I was looking at some statistics the other day. Our students now, nationally, on the average, are 4 to 5 months behind in reading and mathematics. That's something we'll work our way out of as time goes by. Of course, your kindergartners weren't affected by that. Your first graders were not affected by that. So you're starting to bring students through.
Good point.
This will go away. This will go away. But the task that we have at hand is trying to catch up, trying to educate the students. Absenteeism is a huge problem that we have here. Graduation rate needs to be increased.
Right.
Dropout rate needs to be decreased. And those are the things that I look at. And I know what we're tasked with every day. And it's a whole lot more than me walking into a classroom and teaching my subject.
The job doesn't end at 3 o'clock.
No, it does not end at 3 o'clock. There are many nights I've woken up at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. thinking, what am I going to do tomorrow with this child?
Right.
So a lot of my reason for running is to put someone on that board that has that experience, working with my coworkers, working with principals, working with their administration. And I've had a long time to do that. And the honest truth is, the reason that I retired in December of 21 was because I did have a family tragedy that affected me personally because I'm an only child.
Right.
but it also affected my children and my home life. And I just had to decide it was time to go home. I was not as effective. My anxiety was high. But of course, what happened? I stayed out for the next semester, got a phone call towards the end of the summer that year,
Right.
and was called back to work. So last year, I did go in and I taught my own classes as a part-timer.
You're a sub, like basically a permanent
Yes,
sub.
yes, I was permanent sub, but I was teaching my own curriculum. So, and so I did that, and I had been called back again this year initially, but thank goodness we filled a position that allowed my coworker in career and technical education to move over to my classes because she was fully endorsed in my classes as well.
Fantastic.
So we've had some things that have worked out.
So you will not be teaching this year. So that won't be
I
a
will
dilemma
not
for you
be,
if you
no,
win.
and actually it would not have been a dilemma anyway, because until you are sworn in, which is usually in January,
That's correct.
I can continue. I am on the sub list,
Right.
and I could continue to work up until that point.
Right.
And Mr. Wilson knows, and I have been told by a couple of other schools, if we get in a pinch, we're calling you.
You could do that.
Yeah, I can.
And just for the viewers who may be new to Nottoway or relatively new to Nottoway, you retired after teaching. How many years did you teach?
I was in the system. I started in 2000 and I retired in December of 2021. But like I said, then I added another year on last year that I was a substitute, but essentially still doing my job.
But you taught at the high school most of your career, didn't you?
I did teach at the high school my entire career at Nottoway.
In career technical education?
Yes, in career technical education.
That's a big field.
Yes.
Well, let me ask you this. You mentioned the school board, just a general question.
Right.
What grade, you watched some school board meetings, we discussed that. What grade would you give this school board? Of course, you've had to go through COVID and everything, but if you had to give a grade, your teacher's grades, what grade would you, from your observations?
And that's a hard question because grading in the classroom is even something that's is a point of contention.
Sure, subjective.
We've changed the grading scale. I saw this the other day, and I'm not 100% sure about this. I saw this come up in my feed that Halifax is adopting or potentially adopting a new grading scale, which would take, I believe would take an A from an 81 to a 100. But there is a school of thought, for that.
Right.
And having been in the career for a long time, the school of thought there from a gentleman that was wonderful and really made a profound impact on some of my thinking about grading was this. If you have a student who's struggling, they don't do an assignment, you give them a 0. In our world,
I mean, you can't make
that's
it
what
up.
we're used to.
Right.
Yeah, that's what we're used to.
If you're praying, you're having to work hard to pass that class.
Yeah, and the school of thought now really is. It's about student success. And what am I going to do to help that student achieve? In my classes, because of what I taught, my children could work at different paces. I set a pacing guide that was set for the average student always, that middle of the road. Knowing that I had kids who were down here and knowing that I had kids that were going to far surpass that, be finished with the work early. A good teacher will make sure that these kids up here have something else to increase their learning, not necessarily requirement of the course, but we're going to expand upon that learning. That gives me time to work with the kids who are down here in the middle. And I was always able to work with my students because I was teaching computer type courses.
Sure.
And the programs that I used as I moved through it allowed for that. Students were able to work from home, which they had never been able to do before with the programs we had. So they could make work up. And I would take that work right up until the end of the 9 weeks. And sometimes, even if a kid was doing decently, but was kind of between that D or that F, they knew that they could even make that work up with me if it was from first semester.
So you don't want to overwhelm them. Your rationale is you want to always be encouraging and not have them feel defeated after a few weeks.
Yeah, after a few weeks.
But no grade for the school board.
Yeah. Well, I'll say on that. I don't know that I could give a grade per se. Grading for me is just so objective. I mean, it's pretty cut and dry. Right. What I don't like is I don't like politics bleeding in. And of course, I know that we are politically driven. We're politically driven by the General Assembly. Right. we're driven by the Department of Education, but a lot of that stuff is passed down from our General Assembly,
Their
and people
mandates.
don't understand that.
Correct.
I can't fight everything. I don't like the infighting. I'm a person that believes you want to have a disagreement, an argument, whatever. You do that in closed session, or you do that before you meet.
Right.
I think we get the public agitated more when we step out there and we have these situations where somebody's angry and they're not in agreement. And I understand the not being in agreement. We shouldn't all walk in and have 100% the same view on everything.
Right.
But I would like to see it become more of a modem of decorum.
Absolutely.
In those meetings.
And sometimes some of the argument may not even be necessarily what's a
well,
school board issue sometimes.
Yeah, and some things that have happened recently, there are just certain things we can't talk about in public.
Right.
And I'm in a position, because I have been on the forefront, I can't speak to situations that have occurred, or they've been, I can't speak to that with the public. Those are things, that child is protected, those parents are protected, and I don't care if that's the child that was the perpetrator.
Right.
They are still legally protected under the law. And that's somebody's kid too.
Right.
And they're having to struggle with it. Yes.
And it really puts a school board member and a superintendent at a disadvantage when someone comes to the podium. Sometimes they could be absolutely right. Sometimes they could be partially wrong.
Right.
But you can't really address a situation about a fight or bullying.
And I saw a situation not long ago where some things that you could not speak on in public or ask questions in public. On. Well, I can't say were spoken on as much as they were presented for the board to vote to bring that into the public session.
Right.
I already had seen that agenda. I knew what was on that agenda, and I'm sure they provide that to you prior to coming.
Yes.
We cannot speak in public about anything that concerns student suspensions, whether they are long-term, short-term, or student expulsions. I know that parents that are affected by those things, like I said, it could be the perpetrator that, but they have parents too, and that is their child, and we're going to protect their children. Yes, and we're going to protect their children.
So you as a teacher have already had that ingrained in you. So if you do become elected school board, it's not going to be any problem. You learning that you know what can and cannot be discussed, not just at a school board meeting, but even in the grocery store.
Right. And I think the one thing, and this may be something that's more of a legal thing, and I have not talked to Dr. Grimes or Dr. Martin about this in particular. I think parents sometimes feel like they're not heard. They are heard. They're heard by the public. They're heard by the board. I have no doubt about that.
Right.
I do think what I would like to see, if it's legal, and that's where you get into a little bit of a sticking point sometimes. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with saying to a parent or anyone from the community that addresses the board, thank you, you have been heard. Not agreeing with anything, not committing to anything.
Just going on with the next speaker.
Yes.
It's sort of like, someone has spilled their soul, and it's like, okay, next year up, Mrs. Smith has kind of...
I think there's a level of decorum that needs to be there. And of course, I do understand that most of the time, by the time those things have gotten into that public comment section, they have already been through teachers, principals,
meetings with everybody.
Yes. And so I realize it doesn't just happen that somebody just decides to stand up there and vent. They have probably already shared those concerns with the administration, and things don't necessarily like how it was handled.
It's like a Hail Mary. It's like or it's like the final appeal.
Exactly.
Great points there. Let me ask you this. As a school board member, of course, you're just one of 5. What would you do to try to increase, better fill teacher vacancies and also recruit more teachers to Nottoway County?
Well, that's a hard one. And I have been in so many professional organizations throughout my career. That was something that was ingrained in me. I started under one of the best teachers ever as a mentor, and that was Jean Hobbs.
Okay.
I went there when Ann Stinson became assistant principal, so I took Ann's vacancy there. And of course, I was working at Southside Electric at that time, and had been there for like 12 years.
Okay.
The teacher vacancy issue is something that everybody across the state is looking at. It's not just us.
No, sure.
When you watch it and you see what the other schools are going through, if you really pay attention, I see schools that are looking sometimes for 100 teachers. Of course, they're bigger than
Sure.
we are.
Richmond, yeah.
But through my affiliations in my professional organizations, I have had the chance to glean information from every school division across the state. Some of them are poor like we are. They're living in a very rural area. Not a lot of job opportunities within those areas. So people are working basically from paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
I've also worked with my friends, I call them now, from Fairfax, Leesburg, and those schools are huge. I've been lucky to present some things in some of those schools. They're just amazing schools. But they were still facing those same things, even in those areas, because obviously if you go to Fairfax, your cost of living is a lot more. Salary sounds great.
Yeah, but the rent is...
And I've looked up what some of my friends make, and I mean, some of my friends are making $100,000 a year, but of course the cost of living offsets what they're making.
Right.
And so I just...
Is money the answer? I mean, we've heard meetings, school board meetings, talking about, other counties offer sign-up bonuses. We've had some proposals from the public where maybe you ought to have throw a certain amount of money at them if they stay for 4 years, and if they leave within the 4-year period, is money? Is it money? Is it morale? What is it going on?
Well, I think in our case, honestly, me being the older teacher, I will go back. I'll take it back old school for a minute. When I started, I looked around at the teachers that were with me. The Linda Johnsons, the Patricia Johnsons, the Ann Goods, who Ann just passed away, the Dickie Ingrams, So and Jean, I had a group of people that if they had moved in here, because I know Linda was not from here, Linda Johnson was not from here, Ann was not from here. She came here to teach and ultimately met her life partner. I think with younger teachers, and I'm not disparaging them because I was young once.
We all were.
If I'm coming to a place to teach, I'm probably not just looking for a job, because if I'm a good teacher, I'm not just looking at the money, and I'm looking for a social life.
Right.
I'm looking for a partner. These people, married people, just like I did, I got transplanted here, they found a life partner that was from here. So their careers were probably going to be mostly in this school division. That's the old school way.
Very good point.
Younger people, I don't think they want to be in Farmville.
Right.
They want to be, I've got teachers that have lived in Chesterfield.
Chesterfield's much closer than it was 30 years ago.
Yes.
Chesterfield used to be an hour away. Now it's 25 minutes.
I know. But Chesterfield, Petersburg, one of my co-workers actually travels from almost at the North Carolina line every day. And he loves it here. But he's in a position where he's not as old as I am, but he's a little bit older. He has one son. His wife has a job in education in another area. And they're solid. They're solid.
Plus, when he goes home, he doesn't have to worry about bumping in the grocery store to a bunch of parents about, why'd you give my child a D or an F?
And I've heard, I heard that from my dearly departed friend, Deborah Ford, who passed away. And of course, she was a career educator. And finished her career in Amelia.
That's right.
And I used to always say to her, why don't you come to Nottoway and teach? Your daughter's here. It'd be so much closer. And that was her exact answer to me. She said, because it's so nice to be able to run to the grocery store or to Walmart or anywhere I go and not being bombarded with, my kid did this, what's going on? She said, I don't have to listen to any of that.
What did you see? Did you see it on Facebook this morning?
Yeah, exactly.
I hear a few kind of rapid fire questions, and you can elaborate a little bit. Okay. In your opinion, you've got plenty of experience. Right. Are Nottoway schools today overfunded, underfunded, or properly funded?
Well, I think you have to go back to really look at the data. And, I'm not a good person at recalling data. So you have, I had to write this down.
Okay.
I know it, but I don't want to mess it up.
Sorry.
Yeah, the composite index, you already know about it, how that's calculated by the state. Right. It takes a lot of factors, and they put them together. And
real estate revenue, sales.
Yes, your sales tax, that kind of thing. So you have the local required match that you have within, and they're going to marry these two things, and you have the local required effort.
That's right.
And there's a statistic that they will run for data that shows you where you stand percentage-wise And when I look at that, and this has always been pretty much a known fact, if you're studying it and you're in education and at your job, so
Right.
you're interested in what am I going to make? What are they doing for the school?
How much is local government contributing?
Yes. And we always sit and have, ever since I've been there, pretty much at the bottom of that list when you marry those two together.
When what you're saying, and for the viewers out there, is that the Nottoway County, there's a required local match and
Right.
local effort, and the county, obviously by law, must
Right.
equal that.
Right.
But we, I think, are among the lowest counties as far as going over the
that.
minimum.
Yes.
Over the
I
minimum.
believe I looked at, and the data takes a while from Department of Education. It's not always the most up-to-date data that you'd like to look
Might
at.
trail a year or two behind.
Yeah, and we were in like the 7.11% range of going over that. I looked at some of our neighboring counties.
Charlotte has been way over in recent years.
But if you look at it married together, not so much so.
Okay.
But you've got Amelia, probably for obvious reason. And not that they have that much industry there. They don't have prisons. They don't have
bedroom community.
Right, the bedroom communities have moved in. Amelia, Appomattox, Brunswick County.
Wow.
Buckingham County, Cumberland County.
Nottoway.
Yes, they surpassed Nottoway. There was no data for Prince Edward, but I'm quite sure with all the retail and the sales and things that they have in the colleges being there, that they are probably up in there also. There are a few over the state that are under what is like their percentage is under, and I'm like, I don't know how that happens.
How does that happen?
And Lunenburg does seem to be a county that joins us that might be a little bit low. And some of these counties are very close to us because, like I said, we're in the 7% range. You go to the bigger areas, you're going to see people 70% over at times. For logical reason. We just don't have the industry here.
We're losing enrollment, which is not, it's, if you look at Nottoway County's population, go back to 1900, it was like 14,000 people. Well, today we're 16,000, but during that time, we've had a prison, Piedmont Geriatric Hospital, and the VCBR. So there's our non-felon population is about the same as it was in 1900.
Exactly. People aren't moving here. I see that all the time when I, go by 723. How many people are actually working and don't live here?
Right.
That it's a good job.
We have a lot of out commuters.
Benefits, yes, and so that does bother me. I know this is going to be pretty much a dead budget year. I mean, it's already been stated in your paper. Of course, you're not going to do that. You're in an election year. You're not going to do that.
Right.
But really, for me personally, the major job, and really the only job that we have together as far as the Board of Supervisors go and the school board, is that budget. And how are we going to make that work? I would like to address something you asked me in there about the teacher incentives.
Yes.
This past year, which is one of the first times, I don't know that I've ever seen it happen before, but desperate times call for desperate measures. They decided this year, and I thought personally it was a good idea. And of course, Meredith and I, who my daughter is the assistant principal at Crew,
correct.
We go back and forth on a lot of things. She's a younger educator. She brings to light a lot of things in me because I'm old school.
Right.
And so what they did this year was, as an incentive, they decided to incentivize people that were already in the system.
They gave the bonuses in August after if you.
Well, it was if you signed your contract by a certain time.
Right.
I didn't think that was a bad idea because I think then at least early on you know what you're looking at. So now we know we've got 20 positions and they're here. What are we going to do? It allows you to get out there and recruit probably a little bit quicker. The thing about that was there was some disagreement over how that should be given. I know that a lot of school divisions, and they've done this for a number of years, especially in critical shortage areas like mathematics, because that is always a top critical shortage area.
Right.
There were school divisions, and I believe it was Roanoke a number of years, and it was Roanoke City, I believe. They offered some huge sign-on bonus to new teachers.
What happens to the person who just got hired 3 years ago?
Yeah,
like, where's my love?
And that's a little harsh, I think, on teachers who have given, like me, a 20-year career. You're not really doing anything for me, but you are incentivizing someone new.
Right.
But you didn't help me out. that can cause a lot of ripples and a lot of waves, because then you've got this whole population over here who's your bulk, who are your teachers and your staff. And of course, that just doesn't set well with me.
Right.
I think you do need to incentivize the people who work for you. There was a discussion that Meredith and I had about this. I'm going to throw her name in it because she cleared me up on this. And I thought, you're right. She said, it may not have saved 20 jobs here, but if it caused pause for one or two teachers who were maybe teetering on that, I'm looking, if you saved one or two and you got them to come back, you probably did yourself a great service. We just don't have the population. Longwood, they don't even offer business education any longer as a major. That stopped a number of years ago.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes, and people are starting to get out of the education business in colleges and things. A lot of online. I know kids that are going to school to teach that never hit a college classroom. Everything is online.
Wow.
I don't think it's terrible, but I think you glean a lot when you're in there with a professor and you can run things off of them, and you can do that virtually as well.
Right.
The experience of going into a school, I see people that come in sometimes and they've spent a long time practicing for this, and then they're like, I hate this. I can't do this. And high school teachers are different. We will tell you, we could never teach middle school. We could never teach intermediate school.
Right.
I could probably do elementary, but you will hear the same thing from them. I don't know how you do it at high school every day, because they've seen a little bit of that.
And then some people marvel at the primary school. I had a friend who was substituting in kindergarten. He was he's like, they wore me out.
Yes, I said, I can't. You're counting kids all day, reading, all those things. Right. So I don't think that the incentivizing is a bad thing. And honestly, I think they did it the right way. Could have been put back into salaries, but the problem is then you've got to perpetuate that, and you've already got a county who is strapped with the highest expense that they have in their budget, and that's the school division. Right. And you're looking at, now we've got to do this, and you're looking at a school division that's saying, okay, if we're going to do this now we've got to find ways to take money from here to put it here.
Sure. Just to get this, you mentioned your daughter, who is assistant principal at Crew Primary. If you're elected to the school board, obviously, if there's any issues involving Crew Primary, you would have to separate.
I have to refrain from that. I have to separate myself from that. I cannot, the good stuff is always great. You're always happy to hear the good stuff. Right. But no, I would be excluded from any vote that concerned her. But yes, I know what's going on in every school.
Absolutely.
I've been
just
there
want to get that out there. That's fine.
Even though we're all in different places, we all still talk.
Let me ask you this. You and I talked a little bit before we started here. What do you think's going on in Nottoway County, not just school board wise, but board of supervisors? It seems like the last 3 to 4 years, things have just been really contentious over some relevant issues and some that really aren't relevant. You've lived here long,
right?
What do you have any hypothesis of what's going on in our community?
I wish I did. I don't like the arguing. That just does not set well with me. Right. Honestly, I don't like Facebook rants. I don't like the rants when people get on, and this can be parents, different members of the community, serving in whatever capacity they do. Things are not always as they seem. And if you're going to talk, you need to do it from a very factual basis. You're in that business. Right. You understand that. You can't put out hypotheticals, and you can't put out things to me that I really don't know 100%, but I've heard it from 3 or 4 different
saw it on their Facebook post.
Yeah. I think you have to really steer clear of that. Everybody has their own concern, and it is a personal thing for them. It's personal. I just don't like that.
It seems like the lack of decorum, and it's amazing to me what, like I said, everyone has a right to be angry and get upset, especially if they feel they've been wronged.
Right.
But the level of just the profanity and name calling, and people losing friendships over a political statement.
Right. And I don't think, that's something I think you have to remove when you're in situations like that. You really have to remove the person who you really might like as a person versus what they're doing over here.
Right.
I may not agree with you, But this is what we see in society as a whole. I mean, I watch it right now from the presidential.
Oh yeah.
It's like this, and just jab and poke
Yeah.
and do everything.
And then they'll
they
come out and
can.
whoever gets a nomination, they're going to endorse. There'll be a love fest.
Yeah, it will be. And so that has really been something that's bothered. I do
Yeah.
not agree with the cursing. I
Right.
do not agree with getting up and walking out. I do not agree with children being in those meetings and being subjected to that, because that bleeds over into their behavior and really what they think of what teachers are and how they can talk to us or how they can treat us, because we treat them with kid gloves.
So Mary Ellen Yeatts on the school board, even if things got contentious, there was a big issue, you would promise civility.
Yeah,
And
we got to take that down about 50 notches from what it is, and we've got to learn to come together. And if you've got an issue, call it together. If you're on the board of supervisors and you think it's within your purview to tell us what we need to be doing, sit down with all of us.
Right.
Let us come together as a board. Don't just bash, don't just complain. Give us a chance to work it out together. The ultimate goal here is we're all about students, and I don't care what anybody says.
Right.
The first and foremost thing and thought in your mind, and I can tell you every administrator, teacher, even at the school board office, that is the real mission. That is the job we are tasked with, is to sit there and to make sure that we make those kids into not just educated kids, but into good kids.
Right.
And to work with these things. And I can't control what goes on outside.
Right.
That bleeds in every day to what we do. Right. The things that you see happening in there, that stuff doesn't usually start at school.
No.
Those kids have a vehicle we didn't have. The most we could do was run our mouth and write a note.
Yeah.
They have an entertainment piece that sits right in front of them every day.
Do you like the divisions? I've had a lot of people comment favorably on the divisions changing the cell phone policy where phones are out of sight and off during class.
Yes.
And I think some principals have the right to let them use it during cafeteria because it seems like the cell phone, some parent threatens another parent or something, then that carries over into school.
And it does. And children use that as a vehicle. Sorry, they do.
Right.
I've seen some bad things with it. I don't personally feel like it's as bad as it used to be, but I think what that comes from is children have gotten much more adept at hiding it.
Yeah.
They're doing Snapchat now, so it's a little more difficult for us to see that. But if you have good relationships with your kids, and for the most part, I always have.
Right.
I'm a teacher that could always find out.
Well, that's good.
I could find out.
Most of the the threats that the school system had last year, which fortunately were fake, a student would come forward to someone they trust, and everything was solved.
And you have to ask the questions. You've got to find those students who trust you and have forged that relationship. And I always tell them, if you tell me something, your name will never go into it in that office.
Right.
I'm just going to go report, I have been informed that this is what is going on. I'm not going to throw another kid under the bus.
Because they'll never come back to you again, and they'll tell all their friends never go.
Never going to breach that trust.
Right.
Never going to breach that trust.
Let me ask you this. What would you tell parents of Nottoway County public school children today who, of course, the school year has started, but they're teetering. They're like, you know what? We got a kid that's getting ready to go to middle school. We may move our kid to another school. We may move. What would you do to reassure those parents? There's been uneasiness, not just Nottoway public schools, but, just.
It's everywhere.
Right. But what would you tell, because you're in the system.
Yeah. And I don't think, it's like with anything. It's like with the news. I watch the national news every night. We report for 25 minutes on everything bad, everything that causes contempt, but we want to hear the bad stuff. That's what we want to hear. And then I watch Channel 12, so I'm always on NBC 12 and watching the national news. I always like it, though, how they always try to end that news segment with a positive. Yes. But when you've done 25 minutes, and and not everything you control. You've got to report on deaths. You've got to report on tropical storms, hurricanes, wars. You have to report on those things. But it is very depressing.
I watch very little network news. I watch CBS 6 because my daughter's on there.
I know. I do watch her, too.
But like you said, I've gotten to the point where there's an expression in a movie that said Fox News' job is to report something that makes grandma scared and granddaddy mad.
Exactly. Target market. Right. You know that. It's target market. Right. But I don't think that, honestly, for the greater part, it is as bad as parents think it is. Because I can tell you, if I was that afraid, I would not be there. Because I sit in the line of fire.
Yep.
I sit there where I could be caught up in any minute in the middle of a fight. And by gosh, I'm not at the age that I can, and I can't break two boys apart anyway. You do the best you can to thwart anything. And you try to stay on pulse with the kind of the undercurrent of what you're hearing, because you're going to hear it.
Right.
The kids are going to walk right in and say, "Oh, you know what's going on?"
Look out the day in the cafeteria.
Yeah, yeah. I sometimes it's secondhand news to me. I don't even know that it's happened. But I think parents are having an issue with the discipline. I have heard this, and not just from parents, but from community members and talking to some people. Discipline has become, I think, a reason for concern for parents. Like I said, if it was that bad, I wouldn't be there. I would not
You've
have
retired.
put myself.
You have no need to go back there.
No, I would not, and I wouldn't have done it, because some of these problems we've had for years. The worst thing I ever saw happen didn't happen in the last 5 years. It was when Ann Stinson was principal, I believe. So you know how many years ago that takes us.
Sure.
That's probably the worst incident I've ever seen.
Right.
Parents have expressed concern to me over what happened last year, and I'm just going to hit it head on with you.
Right.
There was concern when we had several fights.
Yes.
Within minutes of each other.
People sent me videos, which I sent to the superintendent, because I was like, I don't need to be.
I don't need to see it.
Right.
And and honestly, I'm going to tell you, it's like watching the news. The videos are so clipped and edited,
right,
that you don't really see the whole
Correct.
picture of what's happened. You're seeing what they want you to see. It's
Right.
not exactly what was really going on throughout the whole 5, 10, 15 minutes.
Right.
But that morning, I didn't have to be there at the beginning of the morning last year, because I was just there for part of the day. So many parents have complained, and like I said, I have heard this in the last few days talking with people about the fact that the decision was made at the school level to really kind of handle the congregate setting, because I know you'll figure this, everybody should know this, a congregate setting where you have all students basically in the same place is always a recipe for disaster.
Right.
That, because first of all, it takes me a while to realize that something's going on over here,
big
because
mass of people.
and there's so much noise. Now you're going to figure it out pretty quickly, because you're going to see everybody go that way.
Right.
But when those things happen in repetition, and that was what happened that day, it was very repetitive. I don't think that's any secret.
Right.
So much concern came from parents about the fact that we were punishing the good kids for the sins of the bad.
I think you're referring to the fact, and if I'm wrong, forgive me, that there was a time in Nottoway, I think back in the spring, where kids had to eat lunch in their home.
Yes, which I love.
Right.
Like Ms. Wynn and I, Jackie Wynn, you know Jackie,
Yeah.
we love, because we have very good relationships with our kids, and so we love that. That's a time for 30
And there were
minutes.
probably some kids that maybe feared the big setting that probably liked.
Oh, there are some kids that enjoy eating a lunch,
Right.
like their lunch in the room with it. They'll ask us sometimes, "Can we come eat with you guys?"
Right.
Like they just want
Stay
to
away from the drama.
Right. That's what it is. And I think at that point it was probably handled as well as it could be. And I think you have to take the opposite stance on that. I told my children who were complaining about it, because they want to see their girlfriends and their boyfriends and their friends. That's 30 minutes a day.
Right.
I don't think you're going to miss anything in that 30 minutes personally. I told my students to understand that this was a life lesson, because the few always suffer. The many always suffer for the sins of the few.
Sure.
Got that
It
backwards.
takes one bad apple to spoil them.
Yes, I said in society, this happens all the time.
Right.
I think you kind of have to take the opposite look at that. The look, I think, was you didn't do anything to the kids that did all this, but yet you punished the good kids. No, actually what we were doing was we were protecting the rest of the student population.
That makes sense, yeah.
And the problem in a situation like that arises is I may have those concrete examples. I'm going to pull those kids. Discipline will be given. You're just not privy to what that discipline always is. I'm not privy to what the discipline is. Used to be we did know.
Right.
That's not there again, in our purview.
Right.
We'd like to know sometimes, and we get frustrated with that sometimes too, but those children have that protection,
Right.
and obviously, as you tell us, and we're talking, and they just don't want that to happen. They want to protect that student as well. I just think that that's one of those things that people have to understand about. We ask a lot of questions. We ask a lot of questions when our classroom starts and something like that has happened. We know that children will talk to us. We're going to ask, hey, what's going on? Well, and so you've had this happen, but I also am understanding from my students, yeah, but something else is brewing too that hasn't happened yet, and there's going to possibly be this, this, and this. So we report that. The children are called in that we think are going to do this. They're talked to firmly about what the repercussions will be. I can talk to a kid all day long. I can tell you this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. But they're not quite as emotionally mature as we are.
Right.
Until the kid throws the first punch, I can't say, well, I think you're going to be involved in a fight. I'm going to suspend you for 3 days.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
That was a Tom Cruise movie about that.
Yeah, and so I just, I felt like when I'm listening to the public, I understand they want their kids to have that socialization. But like I said, it's 30 minutes out of the day.
But let me ask you this: when I think it was after spring break, cafeteria lunches resumed. I don't think there were any problems after that. It seemed maybe everyone kind of got the memo that we need to behave.
Yeah, and I think it died down. Reggie had actually put in, I should call him Mr. Wilson.
That's high school principal, Mr. Reggie Wilson.
We've been friends, and I've worked for him for so long. And he actually worked under me when he first started teaching at the high school. Reggie does a very good job. Very good job. We work within a lot of confines now. The General Assembly has set down a whole lot to us about discipline. And when that happens, we're at their will. We have to follow what they say.
Well, when the school board updates its policy manuals, a lot of times people don't like the policies. They're just basically doing what the General Assembly required them to do. And we're coming short on time, so I want to
sure. Go ahead.
enjoy the conversation.
That's fine.
If you had everybody in District 2 right now, around megaphone, they're like, what makes you the better choice? Why should we vote for you? Your answer is?
Well, I believe that it's really because I've had so many years of experience. I grew up in a family that, we have over 100 plus years and counting of experience in this county to the educational system. My mother-in-law retired from there. My Aunt Christine was the secretary to the superintendent for many years. Going way back, Mr. Vaughn remembers this, but Dorothy May, my mother-in-law's sister, Elizabeth Pugh, was the guidance counselor for many years.
Okay.
Actually, Winston's grandmother worked as like not a paraprofessional, but I always called her like one of the grandmothers. This was way back in the day. Then you got me, and now you have Meredith, assistant principal. So we have all of that experience. We have given a lot to this community in respect to public education. I do have an insider's view. Some people don't like that, but like I said, I think what you're going to run into is if you don't have a different perspective on that school board, you're setting yourself up with people who really don't have an understanding of everything that goes on to make that daily operation work.
And you're saying it is possible, the way the elections could fall, that that you could be the only person.
Yes, I will be.
You would only be the person.
I will be the only person on there that would have any background in education whatsoever. And I've been very active always. I mean, I was on the board of the Virginia Business Education Association. I have been part of Southern Business Education Association, National Business Education Association. I also served as the Career and Technical Education Coordinator. And, we're funded a little differently. We're grant funded through Carl Perkins grants. Writing those things, making sure all the data is reported. Bev Koger works with me hand in hand. Dr. Martin works with me hand in hand on that. So we all had a part in that, and we worked very well together. So we do that. So I'm very familiar with how grants work, very familiar about the data sets that have to go into the request for the grant and what they want to see when it comes out, because they want to see growth. And I'm talking about specifically
Sure.
career and technical education.
What I'm hearing from the viewers, folks, I believe what you're saying is you don't need on-the-job training. You'll be ready to go on day one. We've enjoyed this conversation
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And folks, thank you all for following. This has been interview number 4 with Mary Ellen Yeatts. Early voting starts Friday, September 22nd. The election is November 7th. If you don't know where to vote, you have plenty of time to find out. Call the registrar's office or email the registrar at vote@nottoway.org. Again, thanks for tuning in, and thank you, candidate Yeatts.
You are very welcome.
All right.